Speak up a bit louder. Yeah. Hello, thank you everyone for coming. Hello. I'm going to be here for a minute or two because I'm not as interested as these two. So, but just a couple of announcements. Fire alarms, there is nothing planned, so if it does go off, run slowly or safely. Literally just road and we'll just gather there and make sure it's safe to come back. If anyone needs a toilet, it's just through at the main door, the brown door just across the hallway, so you can pop in there. And for CodeBase, a big thanks to Alan just at the side there, helping set this up, and they're always such a great venue for us to come along to. Two speakers, we've got Ben first speaking about Tamagotchis. I'll let them do a little intro, but yeah, super excited to see this, and then just after that I'll be on to Peter. Is that the one you... hello. Nope. You can hear me now. Everyone else can hear me. I'm loud enough. Sorry, Alan. Thank you to Alan, who does everything he can to make me not look silly and fails. Anyone on Livestream can speak. Yeah, sorry. And we'll be on to Peter for games design. Just after that, will be a little break in between, hopefully. So, yes, hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you. You wanting a mic?
I don't need a mic.
No, go.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you, Mike and Ricky, for this opportunity to let me stand here and talk about what I want. And also CodeBase, I'm a hot desker at CodeBase. So if you're looking for a co-working space, networking, or make some new friends, I definitely would recommend here. So I just wanted to introduce myself a bit. My name is Ben, and I'm a B2B UX designer and currently working for a field service management company. I also love exploring AI and UX, so if you want to chat about UX and AI design, feel free to come to say hi after the talk. So today, we will talk about Tamagotchi. As you can see from this timeline, it has been around for almost 30 years from 1996 to 2025. So we will use this talk to go through the evolution of Tamagotchi through a UX and UI lens. So where's the clicker? Just a quick show of hands. Who's ever owned or seen any of these digital pets, or maybe not on this list, you owned a digital pets? Okay, cool. And can you guess which one is Tamagotchi? Or all of them Tamagotchi? Yeah. Actually, you can call them virtual pets or digital pets. You can call them Tamagotchi because none of them really are. So what is Tamagotchi and how it was born? After Japan's economic bubble burst in 1992, Bandai, which is the company that released Tamagotchi, was looking to launch a new toy. Yoki Akihiro, he's a game designer, came up with the idea of Tamagotchi after seeing an ad where a boy was trying to take his pet turtle into the bag for a trip. So that sparked the concept for a portable pet. At that time, most of toys were designed for boys, and after doing some market research, they decided to target on young women. So, which meant the toys need to be more kawaii, which means like cute. So after a close collaboration and a second page to Bandai, Tamagotchi was finally born on 23rd November 1996. And you can see from this magazine, there are some mock-ups of how Tamagotchi looked like before the final form, which is like a dinosaur egg. So the name of Tamagotchi comes from two Japanese words, tamago, which means egg, and yoachi, which means watch. So the original concept was to make it like a watch, make it wearable, but they ended up going with a keyring, but still super portable. And for the design, the egg shape represents the idea of hatching and caring for a pet. Inside the device, it has a 32 times 16 pixel screen. And they use simple icons for things like food, toilet, games, display. just like those 8 icons. So they are super easy to understand without any language barrier, which is also a big reason why Tamagotchi could go global after its Japan release in 1996. And for the target audience, they come up with different shells, which are quite kawaii for players to buy. What made Tamagotchi really unique and engaging is how it evolves based on how you care for it. The better you look after it, the cuter the final form. If you miss too many cares, let's say you would end up with a less adorable character and it might die. So for the character design, they are not just simply cats, dogs, or rabbits. They are like the little aliens in your pocket, and each with their own personality. And they also have an alert function, so which would let you know when your Tamagotchi needs care, food, or attention. So this creates a strong cause and effect loop, which makes players emotionally engaged and invested. So I hope you do want to know which Tamagotchi character you are. So if you don't mind, please scan this QR code and answer like 5 questions, nothing private or sensitive, just about your hobbies, your interests, what you do in your spare time, and you will know the result. I think we can wait like maybe 3 minutes. And stay at the result page. By the way, I created this survey on V0. Are we done? Okay, cool. Ta-da! So who's Mamichi? Oh, a lot of Mamichis here. Okay, cool. So Mamichi is smart, focused, and responsible. He's the overachiever and superstar of Tamagotchi world. So congrats. And who's Kuchipachi? Kuchipachi, he is chill, goofy, and always loves to relax and snack. So who's Memechi? Cool. So Memechi, she is curious, quiet, and a thinker. She's quiet, but always with intense energy. And who's Maskuchi? Okay, we had to. So, oh, sorry. Maskuchi, he's a weird guy and sometimes can be quite mean. Always matches to his own bits, but still super cute. And who's Pochichi? Cool. Pochichi, he is playful, energetic, and friendly. He is the extrovert of Tamagotchi world. I hope they do match your own personality. So Bandai nearly sold 40 million units of Tamagotchi by spring 1998, which also includes like the overseas. They didn't stop just making one Tamagotchi. By 1997 and 1998, they released a bunch of different themed Tamagotchi, and each with their own quirks. Like Tamagotchi Angel, the second picture, you can raise angel characters. And Tamagotchi Devil, you can raise like Devil Gochi. And Tamagotchi Ocean, Tamagotchi Garden, and Tamagotchi Santa Claus, which you can raise as Santa. So the devices that I think really special during this time are, I brought them with me, they are Matsuchi and Osuchi. So one is female and one is male. You can raise them like normal Tamagotchis until they turn to adults. So when they become adults, you could remove the top cap, and connect them like this. So first, they will see each other, and then they will just get very excited when they see each other, and then the screen will turn to black, and then they will start making babies with very loud sound, but I won't show it here because it's just too much. Yeah, you can just connect them like this. So I think these two devices are really unique during that era. Initially, their target audience was like a high school teenage girls, but after it was released, it's getting popular like among different age groups, which also include adults and boys. So this is the original era of Tamagotchi. Bandai took a break and didn't release any new Tamagotchis until 2004. So in 2004, they released a version of Keitai in Japan, which also known as V3 overseas. I also have one with me here today. So this is a UK-released Union Jack Shell V3. Maybe it's released in 2005. But you can see it has a little cute antenna on top left, which it has the same style like a mobile phone back to that time. And the screen has been upgraded to 32 × 32 pixel, so you can see more details of Tamagotchi. And for this device, it could let your Tamagotchi play games to earn money, travel, buy items, or find a mate. One really special feature of this version is infrared connection. So for the Keitai version on the left, there's a login code on the device, and you could put the code on the mobile phone back to that time, and to let your Tamagotchi travel around, play games, or visit their parents. For both Keitai and V3 versions, you could connect with the other device by the infrared connection on top, and to receive or send gifts, play games, or get married. And also for V3 versions overseas, there's a login password, and you could put the code on the PC to transfer your Tamagotchi to Tamagotchi Town on laptop to get souvenirs and have more fun. So in 2006, they released two versions, Antama and Eurotama in Japan, which also known as V4 and V4.5 overseas. So these two versions could let your Tamagotchi find a job and go work. In 2008, they released Family Chi, which you could raise 3 characters as a family. I forgot to mention that, and they also introduced a memory function. So if your battery died on V3 or Keitai, you always could put in a new one, and you could still download your progress. So that means if you have a Keitai or V3 back to 2004, and you never touched it since then. So today you put in a new battery, you could still see the character you raised 20 years ago, which is quite emotional. So around 2008, we enter the era of modern Tamagotchis. with smartphone like iPhone released in 2007, that raised the bar for interactivity and visuals. So Bandai as a company had to step up their game. So in that year, they released their first ever colored screen Tamagotchi, Tamagotchi Plus Color in Japan. So for this device, the features are quite simple, but with better UI. And you can see the details, like it has like more details of like the rooms, like going outside with like with the colors, and the screens have got bigger, and the designs is quite simple. So Tamagotchi kept evolving, and they just like kept releasing new devices like every 2 years, and each with new features. The screens have got bigger, and more features are keeping added into each generation. And for Tamagotchi Smart in 2021, it has a touch screen, and also for Tamagotchi Uni in 2023, which like in my wrist like this. So these two devices you could wear them like a watch, just like their original concept, make it wearable. In May this year, Bandai released the news of their latest Tamagotchi, Tamagotchi Paradise, coming out in July this year, which you could pre-order on Amazon UK. So from 1996 to 2025, so what has kept Tamagotchi evolving and staying popular for almost 3 decades? First, I think as a product, Tamagotchi listens to its users and keep getting user feedback and reflect on their products. From 1996 to 2025, you can see that screens have got bigger and changed from black and white screen to color screen. But some things haven't changed for almost 3 decades. Can you guess what it is? Yeah. Yeah, so some things haven't changed. It's still a palm-sized egg-shaped device with 3 buttons. So the familiar design can make people who owned Tamagotchi before coming back to try the new devices. Tamagotchi always evolve alongside new tech. Back to the connection era, they used infrared connection to link the devices. For the modern devices like Tamagotchi 4U from 2014, you could use NFC connection to download items from the 4U app or on the tablet, and also bump with the other 4U device. And Tamagotchi means in 2018, it has a Bluetooth inside the device, so you could transfer your Tamagotchi into the Meets app to have a date with the other Tamagotchi. And Tamagotchi Pix from 2021, it has a camera inside, so you could scan the QR code to download items or have a play date with the other Tamagotchis. And Tamagotchi Uni from 2023, it has a Wi-Fi. You could connect with Wi-Fi to attend monthly arena events and play with the Tamagotchis worldwide. So all this together brought in new technology to level up the user experience. So users don't feel like Tamagotchi is left behind, so always keeping up. There are many ways to connect with Tamagotchi. The most direct way is human-device connection, you and your Tamagotchi. As the generations went on, they added new ways for devices to connect and link each other, which is the device-device interaction. So if you want to connect and play with the others, but you don't have anyone nearby who owns the same Tamagotchi, you might end up buying 2 or 3 devices just to collect all the characters or the items, which is quite tricky for them just to achieve the KPI. And so the device-device connection and the human-device connection sparked something bigger. Tamagotchi community. Collectors from all over travel to Meetup, connect their Tamagotchis, and make new friends. You can see we have Tamagotchi Club in New York, Toronto, and London here in the UK. So it's not about pets anymore. It's about the connection people build through them. At the same time, Bandai or Tamagotchi is trying to win over the new generations. They've opened Tamagotchi shops worldwide, like in Birmingham and London here in the UK. And also, they re-released some devices, like back to the original era. They re-released the Tamagotchi Angel last year in 2024. And also, last year, it was the 20 years anniversary of the V3 or K-type version. So they released that version as well. So it can make people discover and fall in love with Tamagotchi all over again. Maybe a bit quick, but just to recap from a UX perspective, why Tamagotchi is such a great product. First, it involves with technology, always using new features to keep players engaged and attract new fans. Second, it nails simple and intuitive design, like it use simple icons and portable form factor, which keeps people engaged and easy for anyone to jump in. So, and finally, their marketing is smart, tapping into nostalgia while bringing new devices, which keeps the players and community alive and growing. So all this together brought in Tamagotchi a standout example of thoughtful UX and UI that lasts through decades. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for? Oh, yeah.
It has to do with Tamagotchi, your pet dying. I forgot what happens afterwards. How do you revive it? About the pet. If it dies, how do you revive it? I forgot.
You have to click the reset button. You couldn't just yeah. So that's why it makes you feel like you need to look after it all the time. So just don't let it die.
What do you see next for Tamagotchi? What do you think is going to happen in the next, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they just promoted their the latest Tamagotchi Paradise. I haven't seen the new device yet because it's going to be released in July this year. So for that device, it has a new feature like you could raise a new Tamagotchi planet. And also the new way of connect those two Tamagotchis is like the Osuchi and Mesuchi, like remove the cap to connect them. So, for the next one, they probably would listen to users' feedback first to decide what they're gonna create for the next one. And also they will try to find a new way to attract users, like have a fun way to interact Tamagotchis. And also, they would also think like how to sell more, just like to let you buy 2 or 3 to collect all the characters or items. Yep.
How about AI how about AI where Tamagotchi could learn and basically react based on the training and interaction with the
Ooh,
people?
that's that question. Sorry, AI, right?
Yeah.
As you can see from Tamagotchi's evolution, it always used a new technology, like the Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth. So I think firstly you need to know what users need, because the users of the players are growing up, so they don't want to stay at like black and white screen. And so that's why they come up like color screen with the new technology. So I think you have to listen to what players or users need. So that's also for AI. You can't just come up an AI solution without knowing the problem. So listen to users' feedback and also connect with the technology or using the new ways for interaction and connection. And also be tapped into nostalgia, like bring back the old versions to nowadays. So I think they want to get the old players, like who are adults now, just want to get them back, and also let new generations to try the new devices. So for the AI, I think just the first, you need to know what users need and their problems, and also keeping up with the new models or like the algorithms, and also, yeah, just like ChatGPT, it has the core, their model is the product. So I think for Tamagotchi, it's the same. Their UI and UX is their product. So yeah.
Sort of answered this a little bit, but I was just going to ask about who, from your perspective, who do you think they're kind of targeting now in terms of their user base? Is it kind of younger generations, or are they really mostly leaning into that kind of nostalgic element and trying to capture people who previously had a Tamagotchi?
I think they are targeting on new generations now because they want to build a foundation first, like back to the old time. But I think the most of buyers, they're like me, who owned Tamagotchi before, like adults who could spend money on them. But that's their the main group of like buyers. But I think they are trying to target on young generations, like they open the shops just to attract new generations too. And also that's the reason why they re-release some devices, just to want to get people to know about Tamagotchi.
Hi, Ben. That was a lot of fun. I'm curious how the price point has changed over time, and if that's had an impact on like what technology they're able to fit into the devices, or yeah.
You don't want to know that because I spent a lot on that. Before it was re-released for the V3 version, this old one from 2004 2005 can sell like maybe 50 or 60 pounds. But after it was re-released, the new one's like 20 pounds on Amazon. But for some old versions, like back to the beginning from original era, for Tamagotchi, Devil or Santa Clausi, they can be 300 pounds, which is because, yeah.
Now, but back then, like what was the cost back then?
You mean the price?
Yeah, like the manufacturers.
I'm not sure about that because you can't measure that to the currency now. But I think for the Tamagotchi and Santa Clausi, except Androgotchi and the Tamagotchi Ocean and Tamagotchi Forest, they were only available in Japan. So that's why it's getting very expensive overseas now.
Hello. So my question is there any app for Tamagotchi so people can download on the phone or?
There was. It had a Tamatown on PC, but it's closed now. And also they had a Tamagotchi Live on mobile app, which is shut down as well. They have a running mobile app now, but I forgot what is it called. Maybe I can tell you later.
As you mentioned that they are targeting the next generation. So if I consider myself as a next generation user, I have Apple Watch on my wrist, I have phone in my pocket. So I would think before buying an actual device and extending. And so for example, if there's an Apple Watch app for it, I would just download it on my watch and I can, take care of the pet or whatever the app offers. So are they like planning anything in that direction?
I don't think their product development would approve that because they want to sell more physical devices, not as a real like a virtual pet on your Apple Watch or something. So I think they are also just they just want to sell more something real you can touch and play and get rid of the other digital devices, I think.
Cool, thank you.
Is there going to be a Tamagotchi movie?
There was in Japan back to 2008 when they released Family Chi. Just wanted to promote the device, but it was an animation, not like a real person movie.
I think that's one more.
Okay.
Two more. Right,
can
two more.
can you say something? Oh, yeah, more questions. Okay.
Yes, more questions.
Thank you. So we all know that Pokemon Go is quite popular because it uses augmented reality. I was wondering how is the popularity of Pokemon Go affects or influence the evolution of Tamagotchi?
I think they are, or they were, at two different markets. Pokemon Go is like I feel it's like two different markets. For Tamagotchi, I think maybe people who play Tamagotchi and Pokemon, they are like same generations. But I feel there's just two different ways to, like for players or for users. Like for Pokemon Go, you had to go outside to catch Pokemon. But for this, you can play wherever or anytime you want. So I just feel the user groups are different. Maybe you can have both Tamagotchi and Pokemon Go.
Hi, Ben. Thanks very much for it was a really entertaining talk and very enlightening to somebody like me who's not very familiar with Tamagotchi. But I'm just curious, how many versions of Tamagotchi do you own personally? And if you were to recommend one, what would it be?
Well, I don't have that many. I have around maybe 50, but which is not a lot for compared to other collectors. And I also have a like an Instagram account just to share my Tamagotchi collection journey, and the same to the other collectors. We just share and play together virtually. If I recommend a Tamagotchi maybe to you, I would recommend the new V3. The new V3 on the right is fun and engaging, and maybe you could buy two connect with Ricky.
That sounds beautiful. We're only friends, yeah. So have big buttons for old hands. Yeah. That's what it needs. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ben.
I think.
Oh, sorry. There's another one. I've missed it. Sorry.
Hello, Ben. Thanks for the amazing talk. So since you said you have 50 devices, how many of those Tamagotchis are alive?
I don't run them. I don't run all of them. I just run like based on festivals. If it's at Christmas, I will run Tamagotchi Santa Claus. When it's like spring, I will run some like shells with like the flowers on them. But I just play them. I have a shelf just to play all the Tamagotchi, and I will run them when I feel I want to run them.
Okay. And I have last question on this. So I'm listening to your talk, and you talk a lot about how this product is very successful. And what makes me think is Tamagotchi is also very good at keeping that emotional connection with the product. That's why also, to your point, they don't have an app, because having physical and something you have emotions towards too creates that bond. What would you say, in your experience, with Tamagotchi is quite good, perhaps forming a habit or using behavior economics to kind of form that bond or deepen that bond? What's your observation?
Do you mean like how it could be connected emotionally with players?
Well, no, it's more about, because to create that bond, you have to keep coming back to that device. So for instance, you name it, it depends on you, it dies, it kind of creates that emotional response. So is it something you notice perhaps, like, let's say you need to attend the pet 3 times a day, and that kind of creates that habit of you attending to the pet, therefore deepens the connection with the product. I'm looking for that secret sauce here, like kind of what would be the main tip we can take away from here as well?
Yeah, I mean, the original one, you couldn't name it, but since from V3 or K-Type, you could name your Tamagotchi. I think from the start, you feel like it's your own pet. And it's not like you check 3 or 4 times a day. You had to check on them constantly when they need something, so they would have a sound to let you know when they need food, attention, or something like this. And it's also based on how you care for it. Like if you don't, like if you miss too many cares, you will get an ugly character, which some players don't want. So and also they have a pause function. So if you are too busy, you could just click the first and third button to make it pause. So, which is suitable for the players who are busy. So I think when they design for this, they think about different, maybe different scenarios or situations when players engage with the Tamagotchi. And also they added like the connection function, like they first through infrared connection from the V3 device. So they want people to make friends with the others. When you walk on the road, you see someone who's holding the same Tamagotchi. You might want to just make new friends with through your Tamagotchi. So I think we could just learn a lot from them. I hope this answers. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are we all done? Did you have something else you wanted to add, Ben? No, just a question. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to take a little 10-minute break.
Yeah. I do have something to say. I'm being a bit greedy. So if you have any projects that needs a UX designer, or if you know any opportunities, please let me know. And just feel free to say hi to me after. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Back in 10 minutes. To grab your seats, we'll get started in a little minute, thanks. I should do that as a job. I used to do it in cinema. Thank you very much, and we'll pass you on to Peter.
Let's go straight into it. Thanks for having me. I've been to a few of these sessions as a watcher, so it's my turn to be a speaker. My aim, hopefully, to get through the slides, because I'd rather this was a discussion about the idea, so I'll try not to just be, I'll try to get through the slides quickly, because yeah, I don't like lingering on slides, as you could probably tell. But yeah, I'm Peter Greeves, I'm a game experience designer. I've been working, come on, I got this new clicker, so, to make this look seamless. Start again. But yeah, so I've been working in making digital things since about 2010 when I graduated. Which we're now in near the end of my talk here. So let's just go back and pretend you didn't see that. So yeah, I'm a game experience designer. I've been working, these are the tech companies I've kind of been working in, and my kind of education. So calling out Dynamo Games, Ninja Kiwi Skybet, to Light and Wonder where I am now. So I got my diploma in UX and I'm an animation graduate. So I'll try not to be another visual artist talking and ranting in a UX forum, but I'm hoping that what I'm going to be ranting on about is valid. I'll give you a brief story. I'll focus in on my time at Skybank and Gaming. This was a really interesting kind of position for me because I found myself in a big tech firm, having come from games and small studios. This was the first time I'd been in somewhere that had this really large ecosystem of product owners, engineers, data scientists, and marketeers, and we were all working on the Sky Vegas product. And they make slot games. But they work with studios up and down the country to make content for the platform. And the list here are all those original sparkers of these ideas who really helped me understand kind of UX business processes, how to make things. So these were the kind of minds where I was talking to a lot and discussing things. So my role was in a kind of content team with some producers who then traveled up and down the country to get studios to make bespoke games. So I joined a UXer who was already on the team called Rich Towers. So he was there helping the producers kind of articulate their ideas and then turn them into products. So it was the content team consisted of like Bob Parker, Julian Beck, and Rob Proctor, who you see in the top right there, and they were going about making things that the platform needed. So they would have insights from the data team about what games might be required in this quarter, or what was coming up, or how the fashions were changing. And it's like, how can we articulate these things into something that the studios can then build upon, rather than just saying, I want to make a game because I want to make this type of game. It's like, well, how can we focus that more to answer the needs of the business and what the kind of player appetite was. So what was great about this is like, it was always fast paced, it was always changing quickly. So we started to think like, well, how can we not just send a paragraph of a document? How can we do something a bit more? We had UX researchers, we had all these designers and product processes, and it was like, how can we channel that into making games more accurately and more informed? So this is where the kind of idea of how UX can help influence the game production side of things. And that's when we started to like think, well, how do we research? How do we pivot and fail fast before we make the thing and spend all that money to make a game that may or may not work? So it's how do we become more informed to do that? Time passes on, and I then come to Light & Wonder, where it was Rob Proctor is a VP of gaming, and there was Julian Beck at the time who were now at Light & Wonder and now thinking about, well, how can we take that process and apply it to like game production? So if Sky Vegas was a platform and an operator, we were still doing product stuff. So it wasn't like completely games focused, where this was like all about making games all the time. So it was like, how can we make the right thing without wasting people's like time and effort, understanding, and ensure that there's less confusion what the games producers are wanting the dev teams, the art teams, the math teams to create. So when I joined there, it was like, right, they had bought into this idea of GXD. Now we had to prove out what it does and how it could affect things. So fortunately, Rob's been really supportive and at allowing GXD to kind of grow and evolve within the business. So we've got Jen, who's my counterpart. She's the other game experience designer. We're now 2, which is cool. We've got the art director, and that's VP of gaming, and that's our little bubble. But we serve the content team, so we support them in reflecting their ideas, basically, in order to make sure we build the right thing. So what is game experience? I talk fast. I'll try and slow down. So what is game experience design? I think it's this, and I think games experience design is largely made up as a thing. Again, back to Sky, it was great because one of the managers managed to get game experience design as a name and as a team established. This was V. Barron. She was really good at saying like, well, this is a thing. And Sky got the name as well. So there was a dev team attached to it, but also a games content side. So here, at least where am I going? Yeah, with that background of like how game experience design can be applied, it's been great at Light & Wonder to show, well, actually, we can solidify, experiment, and now it's a real discernible process. And I think it's made up of UX, a bit of production art, and a bit of game design. Because again, this process is not about service. It's not about selling things. It's about entertainment. It's about making fun as well. So how do you plan for fun? But how do you manage that? You know, because you need to understand what you're making and test it and refine it in order to make sure that once you have a game, you know, like the Tamagotchis are playable and usable in what they're trying to achieve. Like, what are you playing and how are you playing it? So I think GX steers are kind of built up within these three things, within that cool little shield. So what I think they are, I think they're storytellers, I think they're interaction designers, they prototype, they interview, they know color theory, they know iconography, they can talk live, they can hold workshops, they have user experience and design experience, they have production design in their head as well, they can do art. So it's kind of an eclectic mix of kind of skills and traits that I think, I'm not talking about unicorns, I think it's just experience of both UX and making games or crafting things. And I think that's what kind of starts to crystallize as a game experience designer. And then what their kind of big concerns are is the gameplay, the interactions, the mechanics, the theme, and the story. So now we're looking at not like kind of the visual and art of it, or we're not entirely into the UX of things because we're not going to map out kind of like conversion journeys or things like that. We're going to say, well, how do we interact with this story? How do we play this game? You don't want a game to be predictable, but you want to make sure that people can use it and understand it. So that's where, again, I think a GX steer comes in, and we work with the producer or the game designer to help them figure out their ideas. We're not designing the game mechanic, but we're helping them see what that mechanic is and rationalizing it in a way, so that they're not saying to the studios, oh, make me this thing. And they're going, well, what's the thing? It's like, oh, it does these 4 things. It's like, what are those 4 things? What do they look like? Which are the kind of questions developers might ask. And artists is like, well, what am I going to do if you're saying this does that, but that doesn't actually work when I make it for real? So it hopefully stops a lot of confusion, a lot of kind of back and forth, and just like allows those kind of producers or game designers, whoever's making the game, to understand what they're asking, to see it, refine it a little bit earlier, and then go on more. I mean, there's always more discovery later on, but at least when those developers and artists start to come in, and being in slots, you have mathematicians as well, and the math team is kind of core to slots. But I'm going to talk a bit more abstractly about games production in general, rather than about how you make a slot game. So this has got, let me catch up. I've got 4 steps ahead of myself, so I'm going to trip up in a bit. Yeah, the concept of users, I think, for game experience designers is about the players, but there's a few gateways and a few people who are your users before the product goes live or before you even test the product. And I think when you have a game designer, you're interviewing them like a UXer would you interview a user. You're trying to extract and understand without influencing too much, because you want their idea, rather than to say like, no, I think you should do it this way. It's like, well, what are they trying to achieve? What do they need from this? To be able to then go on and expand upon it and test it cleanly. You can also then sell these ideas or get the stakeholders involved, because making a game isn't just like an end product. Sometimes they exist over time like Tamagotchis, or sometimes they're just one thing that goes out and you never see it again. So it's like, how can you make sure that the right people can see it and understand it to invest in it, or to understand it to help support your game or your project? And then your next layer of users becomes the QA, the developers, and the artists, because they need to understand how it is the thing you want to make works, or how it plays. Like, does a character need to go up? Does it need to go down? And in which way is it going up and down? Is it flying, or is it digging a hole? Is it just jumping a platform, or is it like scuba diving? So what does up and down mean to a QA and a developer will determine what they have to do in their end. So, and again, throughout those kind of processes, there's like always opportunities to test. So if we want to see how that applies, let's take this kind of pipeline for an example. I don't know if this exists, but it kind of shows what maybe may happen in your game production process. So you've got like pre-production, where you're thinking you're coming up with all the things, and then you go straight into production. You get in production, you're like, I don't know what, like, you might hit now I've got a laser on this. Yes. You might hit a gap here, and you're like, I don't know what to do. We need a solution. So then you're like, right, well, we have to solutionize that. That then adds a bit more time to your production timeline, and it might be tight. So what you try to do, and again, this is what game experience is there for, is to try and alleviate these gaps and try, instead of like when you want the artist to making, like drilling down and making awesome art animations, like getting on with the sequencing, you want the coders to know what they're doing and being able to like really like bash out the game. We can come in as a way of problem solving within the production process. We're also at the beginning. So that is where that kind of producer relationship, the game designer relationship starts. It's almost like a pre-pro before you even get to pre-pro. So you understand like, you know, the mechanics of the game, how it might work. You're not gonna have all the answers, but all those key, like, you know, you have your hero's journey when you're doing journey maps, right? How do you know the key landmarks in your game before you even get into pre-pro? So then pre-pro can spend more time expanding on those things that don't need as much drilling down on because you've done it earlier. And largely, you know, by the time you get to pre-pro, you've hopefully already had your art in your dev teams. If it's the game structure, you know, whoever is going to be doing a lot of the production stuff sits in that space as well to help see what you're doing, to discuss and share and invest in what it is you're going to make. And again, you will have a prototype of some script for people to kind of play with, to get context of how you want it to use it, how you want to make those controls work. So yeah, so all that information kind of goes into pre-pro, and it, you know, whether the GXD output gets carried forward or not, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of about the conversation and the way in which you kind of help and support people solve their problems. Again, is kind of what your main concern is, especially within your process, within your own process. So when you are at that that pre-pro stage, this is sort of the structure I think you're working to. So you're always going to have your information gathering, whether that's research or kind of analysis from a data team, or maybe there's like a market strategy, or maybe you just have an idea that you want to make. You still need information in order to get to those discovery marks, like what am I going to, you know, what am I actually going to make, or how does that idea work? And in that discovery phase, you can sketch it, you can go into define, where you might wireframe it a bit more and develop it, where you might actually have a full render of something. So that's kind of an abstract of that process structure. Kind of tends to look more like that. Each one informs the other. You make something here, you go for it, you go, ah, shit, that actually needs more of this. So you go there, but then, you know, you can develop some of it, and then that development, you're like, actually, we need to define it a bit more, but a bit more discovery. Oh, crap, we can actually go to development. Oh, we need to get it live, right? We need to go to production. So that's like the kind of ways in which you jump between all those kind of skill sets you might have. You might be called to do an interview. You might be on call to do a prototype. You might have to sketch and concept something. You kind of jump, but you never go into kind of like, I'm going to do the final animation. I'm doing the production assets. You know, you don't really ever enter in that space unless it's to communicate something informative rather than something aesthetical or usable. If that makes sense. Yeah. I'll quickly talk about, 15, okay, cool, halfway. I'll quickly talk about the understanding what you're building on, like the Tamagotchi. You need to know your screen size. That's very important to how Tamagotchis work. Or you're working on a kind of TV for a console. Knowing your screen, knowing how to measure it, breaking it down into like what the structure is, I think is your kind of table to start designing your game from. You know, how, you know, with responsive design, do you need to know all the different scales? How's your game going to work in a more responsive environment rather than such a contained one? So by measuring your screen, understanding how it's structured, allows you to create kind of categories of things. You can measure your buttons, your icons, especially for UI. This can then apply to like characters or buildings within it. So you're jumping between UI and content based on these measurements. Again, you can get your text. I used like kind of composition guides, so like photography, you have thirds, because there's something artistic to game design as well, so it's not just like purely servicey or functional, it's also kind of expressive and abstract. So you need to also have a few checks and balances if you've got small devices or large screens to make sure you're hitting safe zones or key target areas where if a device is kind of rotated, what does that do to your game and how does that affect the way things are structured? So that's, yeah, that's the basis of what I'm now going to follow. So I'm not very good at signposting the next stages, but yeah, that's why we have big blue slides. So yeah, so we have our measuring system to build upon, to build our games upon, and how we build our games is, again, via insights, previous learnings, discoveries, any innovations that you might have. It might be based on an idea, so there's a new idea that you might have that doesn't exist, so you need to learn more about that. The game designer's like, oh, I have a thought, I really want to make this game. I have all these insights and understandings, and that'll kind of go into a spec doc, or you'll have a client brief that already tells you what you're going to make, or you've got a company brief, which has a very specific requirement for the next quarter. It really all has to fire into those ideas and what it is you're going to build. So some of the things I do is like ideation sessions, jumping in, classic post-its. This can be done physically or online, which we'll look at. But yeah, you're just trying to get, again, from this group of producers and important people, trying to understand what it is they actually want to build and how, and what type of game they want. And it doesn't have to be like super detailed, as long as you've got kind of type and mechanic, maybe there's a theme, there's a loose spec, you can kind of start to build out their thoughts and reflect it back at them in the discovery stage. So that's when you've got the information, you understand what they kind of want, you can start getting into like more the nitty gritty. So, some things like the functionality of the game, how does the game flow, what do you want to happen in it, how's it going to happen, like who's it happening to, what will the player need to know, how are they going to interact with it, is it a console, is it a touch screen, is it 3 buttons? You need to know what some of those high level ideas are so you can start to really start to define what it is they're asking and then start to see if this is actually going to work as an object, as an interaction, as a thing. So yeah, that's kind of more about, it's a lot like that, talking to producers or game designers about rough ideas about what they want. So you'll also want to make sure that you understand some of the flow of the game, like how is that game going to operate in its most basic form. It doesn't have to be complicated. We're not building anything yet, so simple flow diagrams can help you understand what may have to happen within the context of like this game you want to make. So I've made a very simple one here. There's one flow, learn the controls, and then find the first item and use it. So, we map that out as a potential thing that we want to understand. There might be an information point. So again, you're playing with the game content. You are playing with UI as well. It's not like you're just doing the one thing. They kind of relate to each other because they both inform how that game is going to play. Sometimes, so whilst you're on those calls as well, you start sketching. So you sketch within the framework. Say we're making a mobile phone. We're making a mobile game, and it's in a portrait orientation because no one wants to rotate it. That was the insight. Everyone wants to hold it and play it like a console is the idea. Or maybe they want to play it with one hand. I don't know. Maybe there's a bit of innovation there or something. But for you, on a new idea, you don't know what it's going to be. You just want a character that finds a thing, uses a thing, and then carries off on an adventure. So you might think, well, we want it to be a platformer, or we want it 3D, or we want it isometric. So now you've got your variants. We're not of mechanics, and we want a character that has a weapon that finds a thing in an environment, and we play with those structures. We're not, they're kind of fast and loose at this point. Again, keeping options. We go into this kind of white label sort of language, and then from that you're able to kind of articulate a little bit cleaner what those initial concepts were in a way that can be communicated to other people. That, to some, is just a scroll of someone who doesn't sleep much, to something clean that can be understood. Now, these are also assets. So for me, I work in an Illustrator because I can create shapes, and I can push and pull those shapes. So you're making this thing tangible. So when you have to share it with someone, they can, again, back to who your user is. Well, sometimes it's the people in the production team, and they can see it. Maybe you get a dev to take these assets to make a quick prototype, and it's in a language that, everyone can understand that. There's nothing it's not about aesthetics. It's about, well, can we describe the functionality quickly, fastly, and pivot? I can then, you can make any shape with a white line with a black line and a white box. So yeah, like I said, you can define any shape. I didn't mean to type don't know which buttons. I've got 3 ways of changing the slides. So yeah, so you've got into your define. So in this phase, you've got all those ideas, those mad things. So it's like, do they make sense? How do we make sure we can rationalize what we've just planned or the abstract thoughts that we've had that make sense in our head, but do they make sense in reality? So we need to make these things real. So one of the other parts of my process is looking at the storyboard and like thumbnail storyboard using small iconography to articulate big things. So it's nice and clean. You're working within, again, a mobile framework for this game, but you're pushing and pulling shapes. And it's, again, these shapes can then be kind of extracted and used in a prototype. So you're not, nothing's getting wasted. You're always building on something you've already made rather than going on Google, oh, I want a tiger. It's like, well, how am I going to use that in a prototype? And it's not going to make sense in the language of what we've made. And we might pivot from that. That's a waste of time, just like lo-fi, simple stuff. You don't have to have an art degree. You can draw a stick or a triangle. Don't let the lack of ability to draw stop you. ChatGPT does not have to draw you a triangle. You can draw a triangle. So yeah, and that's this thumbnail represents that flow you saw earlier. So they finds a weapon, opens the box, finds the next uses the controls to climb the ladder, and then hit a boss. So you hit all your landmarks that were in that flow earlier. So you're carrying forward, your idea or your concept, and you're exploring it and understanding it and building on it. So the next stage of that, when you've got all your assets, is getting them in the environment you might be working in. Maybe you're working in 3D, maybe you're working in Blender. I do a lot of 2D stuff, so I go into After Effects, and I use After Effects like you would if you're making games. So cutouts really don't use the full power of After Effects. Keep it reduced. There's something to being just trying to make a square work and explode into parts where you don't use the particle kind of effects. You might use like cut out bits of circles that you made from the sprite sheet, because when you go into Spine, which is a tool that gets used to animate things, they have to work in cutouts. There are no kind of effects. So you're reflecting what's going to happen in production in the early planning process as well. So you're not making ludicrous statements about what you're going to make. You're making articulate things that can be made. And that's what this looks like. that's what the file looks like for what's next. And even in this tool, if we get an insight, I can quickly pivot and draw a new shape quite quickly on lo-fi and add it into this experience. And then we can work out, like, well, does that work when you play it on a timeline? Because games exist in time, they're not stills and pictures. You need a way to explore it as a moving piece and as a live object. So for me, these are motion wires to explore those ideas. So we had, again, side-scroller, we've got a 3D game, and we've got an ISO game. And again, you can get these built, you can get them on a phone, and you can take them to a player, or take them to a stakeholder, or take them to someone to see, does this work? Do you understand what's going on? Can you interact with it? This could just be a video. Again, Jen, she works a lot. She's really good at understanding Figma, and we're looking at a way of how we can take these videos, especially in what we do, making slots in terms of like, these videos can be cut up and turned into little interactive. So we can use, because we've built these motion wires in a usable, shareable framework, we can then fire it into Figma, put it out for a test, and go, okay, does that work? We can interview, does the perception of what we're asking you to do actually land, and does it test? And then we take those insights and we go again, hence why all the squiggly lines. So yeah, so maybe you take these out and you find out what actually the appetite, maybe there's some business insight. It's like, actually, we want to make isometric games because that's current. People are responding to it and they can play it. And we want people to have just, the others are two-handed controls, but you're on your mobile phone. I just want one control. How does that mechanic work? And how do we build that so that this game works? So in this one, you just walk up to a ladder and you climb up it. You're not hitting A to jump. A is a call to action button now. So you've reduced the controls and you can play on a mobile. Does that make sense? Does it work? You need to develop it. You need to actually make it real and physical. And again, in a lo-fi way, tying back to make it cheap and easy, because then you can make bigger, more expensive ideas later. So you can then take these prototypes, say maybe these are stakeholders, maybe they're investors, maybe it's a focus group. You can take that thing and actually play it and test it. You're not only just like testing like the usability of it, you're seeing, well, do they respond to it? Back to that emotional question earlier. Do I feel a connection to what it is I'm playing? Because it's not just about the functionality of going through a process. It's a piece of entertainment, it's a bit of fun. And you also need to know that what you're making is landing in the way you want it to land. Because you could make something and you think it's the best thing ever. No one cares. It's just like, no, I don't connect with that. Throw it away. And lots of things do get thrown away. Like a lot of my work, will only go to the storyboard stage, will only go to one initial prototype, but it's the learnings that you get within that you carry forward. And that's the sort of point of GXD, because you're never going to be making the product. It's that kind of early part to find out, well, what that product should be. So yeah, that in this stage is kind of handy once you've got the mechanics, because then you can then, let me tie it back to the emotional thing, back to theming, which is the next layer, which is maybe when you start to encroach upon more what it is you actually want to make. So a theme can be added to that. All those 3 games, I quite like ISO games. I think they're fun and a bit silly. So I was like, you could put a theme on that mechanic. So burritos fighting scorpions in the land of cake, I thought would make a great game for everyone to play. So that, again, we'll take that to test. We'll see, do people like attacking scorpions as a burrito? I don't know. But we've got a lo-fi prototype where we can actually use it and play it and see what happens and see if they do. So yeah, I'll leave that there and see if anyone wants to make that. Yeah, I haven't animated. I'm far too tired to animate that bit. What you've got in the end is a kind of spec doc, and a very comprehensive one, I think, at that, because you spent time lingering on the concept and making sure that you're doing all the right things you need to then go to the production side of it, and then go to the studios, and then they can also feed back. You could start again. They can inform what you've done because you have them at the table as well. It's not just like you in a room with one person. All those things that we talked about get shared and sent across teams to look at and return and give insight to. So you're making physical shareable things beyond the people that are thinking them, which I think is really important in making sure that you make something that can actually be played, understood, and kind of emotionally connected with. So that's games. There's a lot of chat about games. I hope that wasn't too rambly. I do ramble, and I do go on. And I know we're being filmed. And people I know are probably picking up on that. I think GXD isn't just about making like games and interactives. I do these things called loops. And the way I kind of explore them is kind of using the GXD process. You sketches and prototypes and motion wires to the final render. I mean, you can imagine like this, could this be, you need to figure out how this sequence works because you're going to project it in a physical space. And you need to make sure that when you are in that space, the framing works within, I was almost about to point this. I'll use a different bit of wall. Maybe you're going to project something in here, but you need to know if your animations are going to work or the story is going to land. Maybe it's someone who bumps into a door and can't get through it because they're made of light, they're not real. So how do you test that? You could make a lo-fi prototype and see how that might work to inform, well, maybe we actually have to do something different and pivot. So I think it's like a way of kind of UXing creative things and understanding them further beyond just like UI and menus, which again, we do also do it in my job, but that's secondary to the game's content. It's not the main focus in the way that I think creative things are kind of about that kind of, creative things are about those emotional responses, that sense of play and wonder, the unexpected, I don't know what's going to happen, but I enjoy it. I think we make too many predictable things, too much seriousness about, oh, we need to make sure there's a conversion, but then I don't have any money for stakeholders or investors, so maybe that's why I like silly things. I'll jump to my final thought before I get lost down a rabbit hole there. What I think GXD is a method of inquiry. I'll read this out loud, although you can read. Where I think GXD is most effective is in how we investigate a creative conversation to extract the ideas and make them physical for people to reflect and play on, which I hope is what somewhere in that talk has come through. Thank you. What are your thoughts?
Do you have any questions? Oh, 2 seconds.
Thanks for that, Peter. It was really interesting. My name is Dave. I have worked as a games designer. I spent about 5 years in AAA development.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm trying to grasp. So like we're the team that's involved from the very start of the game to the very end. We're out throughout the whole thing. We're integrated with teams, and we're doing all the things that are covered in what you've kind of outlined in the role. I'm wondering if you can help me understand maybe what's different with the sector that you work in as to why there's a separation of those, and maybe what game designers do that you work with that might be different from what I would have done and my colleagues. Bear in mind, we're in a team typically of 6 to 10 people of game designers on a game like that, for me.
I don't know which studio the game's going to go to.
Sorry?
I don't know which studio that game may go to in my role. So we create spec docs and packages of information that may go to a studio in Bristol, it may go to a studio in Montreal, it may go to a studio in Vegas, it may go to a studio in Australia, it may go to a studio, where else? Malta. So we're not always going to be there to make the thing, and we need to make sure that the people who are going to be there are as informed as possible when they do make the thing. And they'll carry it forward. I'll be there. Ideally, again, yeah, you would like to be through the whole process, but we're a big global games company. We're not going to be there for it. So there are parts of it that are still to be worked out in production, and that's why the art teams and the dev teams are kind of involved up front as well, because they're the ones that are going to have to carry it throughout the whole thing. Our role is to alleviate that kind of try and lift the fog a little bit. But yeah, we'll send videos, we'll send maybe get some little prototypes or anything to help communicate and understand what it is that's being asked of them. So when we get production in the other side of the planet, when we're all in bed, that document exists and is understandable in its own right without us being there to explain it until whoever is in charge of that game wakes up and then has to have those midnight calls with that team. So I think that's the difference between things that have to go, like that's why, for example, this evolved, is because it has to go to somewhere that we're not making it, someone else is, and then we've got to get to the next one whilst that's being made, because another studio needs another brief for another thing. So does that make sense?
Yeah, the production's outsourced. So that being the case, who's the creative lead on it during production?
So we call them the content team, so the content director, or in other companies it could be the producer or game producer or whatever. They sit with all this, and that's who we work with, and they take the understandings and the learnings into that production. So yeah, it's a beast. Cool.
Any other questions?
No, go for it. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for the talk, Peter. I was really curious because I never heard game experience designer as a separate discipline. I'm a user researcher myself. I work in video games and tech startups. And what you described was very similar to what I experienced as a job of a UX designer who works in video games. Is that kind of similar?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of same?
Yeah, so the team that I was in at Sky were all UX and design. I was brought in because I was from games, so I did mobile games. And that was where the ideas started to form. game experience design is a made-up word, based on pulling different ideas together from UX and production design.
Yeah.
So this is my argument: is this is a thing, and this is what you call it. Is it? I don't know. This is, that's the debate.
So it's kind of similar. Like I can call myself game user researcher if I work in games, or just UX researcher if I don't work in games. So it's kind of similar.
I guess. I mean, like, that's what I was trying to say. Maybe, like, is there something beyond just saying games? Or you're just some kind of creative experience designer? I don't know. Is there another way? For me, because I'm in games, it's games, and largely this is about interactive, playable things. Is that a game? How do we define a game? Is it just interactive play that needs to make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe also like gamification kind of.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's off gamification, and but what are you doing with that gamification, and how do you explore gamification? For me, it's game experience design explains gamification and how that plays out, because you're playing with the content of that gamification, if that makes sense. You're not just looking at the experience of the thing. You're having to tie in the story, the theme, what it is with how it's going to be used, I think.
Thank you. Can I ask one more? You said you actually did some user testing, or your team made. Maybe you can think of the most interesting or unusual insights that you got from user testing of your designs.
So we did in Sky Vegas, Sky Casino. We had a really good UX research team, and there's a product called Prize Machine, and we explored those via testing. A lot of people want, because I guess the nature of the industry is, people just want their reward, they want their thing. So you would play the game, and then you'd ask about the experiences, like, oh, I won X, and you're like, they didn't entirely acknowledge that an orange just exploded in their face, and that was fun. But they didn't not talk about it, and that product is really successful because it's quite playful and quite simple. So we found that it's like in that scenario of a kind of, it's more of a marketing free-to-play thing, but like knowing what that product was for, we could test it in a framework that said, well, we're not going to bamboozle the customer, because we made a game for a previous game that did bamboozle them because it didn't make any sense, and it sounded good in abstract and as a picture, but then they started to use it and they're like, I don't know what I'm getting. It was sort of like an abstract roulette wheel. So when we tested that, it was adamant that this had to be how it was. But when we tested it, no one understood what it was. So we were able to pull the other solution we had, which is what we were really wanting to focus on, and pull it back in and sort of add some of the elements that they wanted from the other ones. So it can help, it can help break that debate of, no, it's my thing, I need it to work. It's like, okay, well, let's see if it works. It didn't work. Next. Next idea.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah. Sorry, I'll come up to you next.
I guess I wanted to ask whether you have ever kind of had to jump in the middle of a project, or whether it's all making like games from scratch from the concept up, and like whether there's ever in your roles that you've done any maintenance or like expansion aspects, or mostly just and how that might affect your process, like jumping into the project.
Yes.
Rather than
absolutely. I will always work in that lo-fi white label, because I'm there not to work on the object, I'm there to help the conversation, to help solutionize. And again, you don't start going, oh, well, I used Blender to make sure that this thing would work, but you're building it in Spine, which is a lo-fi 2D thing. So the way you explore that solution has to match what they make. So there was a game we were making, and some of it didn't. Again, it's about making sense. So it was a theme game for a big brand, and we had to understand the way this mechanic worked. It was like a wheel that kind of communicated to the main kind of reel set, and it wasn't matching up with what they were reading, how it was playing out, and what they needed to know. So they were perceiving that they were getting a result which they weren't. So then we had to come in and, there was the art director, there was the game producer of that game, and we sat and tried to work out, well, how do we iron this out? Multiple lo-fi versions, spin it out. Again, I like After Effects because I can't code. That was one thing we had at Sky, was a really creative coder who built the prize machine stuff really quick to test it. So that actually is another aspect to game experience. If you have a game experience design team, get your designers, but also have a coder who's quite creative and quite quick at making prototypes, because that's really critical. So yeah, so there was a point where we did jump in mid-production. It was tight because the deadline's coming. Solved it, solutionized it, put it in, and yeah, ironed out that crease. So I can't remember what the other part of your question was. What was the other part of your question? No, that was that it? Okay, cool. I have a very short-term memory. At the back.
I got the impression you do a lot of rapid, low-fidelity prototyping and user tests. Maybe a lot more than I get the opportunity to do.
Yeah.
I was just curious to know if it's been something that you do a lot of, if there are any key learnings just in terms of implementing rapid usability and prototyping tests, or any advice?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Yeah, you've already got me chewing. Absolutely. I'm separate from production. We sit in the content team, not in the production teams, not in the studios. So that content team is in a separate kind of column. We do blur over and we are informed by them, but we're not like, the studios will be churning and going fast. Like, they work really fast to make things. So we're not on the ground. Some games, they have to go through and they don't get GXD. There's already a key sense of what it is, or it's a game that they already are familiar with. Maybe there are some nuances. We get assigned to like the key things that need made. So new games essentially, or if there's a little problem to be solved. Sometimes we support the product team as well, but we orbit rather differently. So sometimes, we've been helping product out. We have a product team in the business, so sometimes we help them out. So because it's just, well, for now, it's, me and Jen, we can jump and be quite flexible as to who we work with. We work in the gray a bit as well. So yeah, if you are in production, and that is hard to break from, but do you detach a degree of budget to create a kind of team like that in order to make sure that you can feed into those to those teams that are locked in on that deadline and on that drive? Or do you get used to making these lo-fis as part of your process? Do you get used to like making quick prototypes and the methods to go into that so that you yourself can sit and fiddle? Like trying to teach the content team some of these storyboarding techniques or drawing lo-fi wireframes. Is there a knowledge share there? I don't know. Like, how do you find yourself thinking when you're making things or in your process? Like, how do you find your brainwaves when you're making things?
Generally, I mean, I'm a UX designer, and so often the timelines are always much shorter than I'd like with the product teams. And I guess it's very fast and loose and quite really low fidelity stuff.
Yeah.
And just trying to find users, doesn't matter how low fidelity it is you put in front of them, getting the testing, synthesizing the results. It always feels like a challenge to try and do it in a timely manner.
Yeah.
And it seemed like you were doing it much more intensively, which I was quite interested in.
So, I mean, like I said, our VP, he's been great at championing GXD as a thing and keeping our borders safe in order for us to do our thing. Mm-hmm. So that's how, but we have to prove value. It's not just like, I like having this thing. We need to make sure that we are delivering as well. Mm-hmm. So, but it was part of a bigger strategy to say our processes need to be more informed, more efficient, blah, blah, blah. And that's where, that's why I referenced the Sky, because that's where it happened, because it was fast paced. This way of working was able to evolve and develop and be a bit shit sometimes and be really good sometimes. That was a good time, but that was like, say, 2016 to 2019. I joined the company, Light & Wonder, 4 years ago, because that VP was now in charge of games and iGaming in that sense, so he could architect that process to make sure that these concerns were answered in this way. So that's how I got spaced, I think. And yeah, 4 years now, so just got to make sure this year works. But yeah.
Hi, thanks again for the talk. I found it also quite interesting since I'm into game experience generally as well. So my question is, it has to do with, in the company you work with, it's, you mostly work on games that are, I would say, maybe from what I've seen, like the side-scrolling and the 3D and the isometrics, are they usually like short games, or are they like world level, you know, Zelda? Is there a limit to the game world that you work with, and how does it affect you, whether in like timeline or decisions or?
So what I presented here was I completely made up. That was a total abstract and doesn't exist. I've just spent the last week making it up. But it's an abstract of what we do, and it touches on what, you know, how you can pivot. You can make short games. You could spend a lot longer. You could spend a whole couple of months expanding that and just playing with it and refining it in that way. It's how you explore something and understand it. So, you know, that for my day job, it's slots, and they're very structured, and they have lots of formulas, and they have everyone knows what it does, and there's a particular mechanic to it. So the way that these work is tied to what it is and how it works and what people want to play for. They want to gamble. They want to play a platform game. They want to play points. They want entertainment. If you're in game design or an experience designer of that kind of descript, what's the output? The way you're exploring those ideas doesn't change. Like I worked in mobile games where monkeys threw darts of balloons. You know, it's very different to whether the multiplier is landed and you understand how that multiplier landed. So they're different worlds, but the method of inquiry and the way of understanding it is the same. Much like I was trying to say at the end, you know, those, you know, I graduated as an animator. How can I understand my animations better? Well, I need to see if people not like them, but do they understand it? Do they respond to it? So you can use that process to go, well, you know, okay. I have an idea for a short film. I've bashed it out as a wireframe to see if it works and how that works in time, using the same method. And then I took it to a mixer. There was a scriptwriter and filmmaker who then looked at it. Sharon, I think, names. But yeah, Sharon looked at it and said, oh, I understand this, and could add to it and build it up in certain areas where it was weak, where I didn't quite know it was weak, but because I had, you know, a version of it that was readable and understandable, she could inform it and say, actually, there's a gap here. How does that work? You know, and then to get to the other guy, and he helped me start the film. So a guy called Ken, he was like, well, what if the start of it's like this? Because you have something to show on a timeline. So it's the same as when you're making an interactive thing, or like I say, an installation. How does it work? How's it going to work? Do you understand it? So, yeah, that wasn't too.
Yeah, that covers it. Thank you.
Cool.
And may I ask, what sort of softwares do you use other than After Effects? And you said Spine or Spline?
Yeah, so Spine is a production tool. I use After Effects and Illustrator because it's a communication tool.
All right,
I'm not really looking to make an artifact, although these are artifacts. That's not what I'm aiming to do. It just helps me reflect back the idea of what someone has. Like I used to be a production artist. Again, that's where the production art side comes from. So I know what's going to happen when it has to be done. So I work in a similar way, but you know, I could draw it on we could do a whiteboarding session, and I would still use the same method and the same mode of inquiry to get to those conclusions.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Unreal or Unity were a part of it?
Because this is about communication, the tools could be, I mean, you could be building in Unity, you could be, that could be a something you'll work within, that's your framework. So these are just frameworks. I don't work in Unity, but say I did a game that was in Unity, that would be my framework. So I work in that. So you just adapt. The tools always change, and you'll learn a little bit about them, but you'll operate within the limitations of them. So yeah, maybe look at it that way, because you might work on a game that has to be a web game, so your Unity knowledge doesn't land. So.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you very much, Peter. That's all. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. That's us. Yes, thank you very much for coming. Keep an eye on the Meetup page. We'll add some other ones when we've got them planned. If you're at home, stick the kettle on. If you're in here, there's a pub down the road. Let's go there. Thank you very much.